Hi and welcome to my video. What we are doing today is we are making a video on showing you my basic veneering techniques and how I press just an ordinary flat panel. As you can see, the veneer comes to me rolled up. This is raw veneer. There's no back or anything else. It's just, very thin sheets of actual real wood. This is what we're going to be using today is a veneer called Edamo. It's a figured veneer. I'm not sure exactly where it comes from, but we're going to show you here. This is the actual veneer. You can see the figure in a straight grain, and it's very pretty stuff. Presses out very flat. It's a little wavy, a little more difficult to deal with some veneers that are out there, but this is what we're using today. This is the piece I'm doing right now. I figured I would just make a quick video on my techniques. So first we take the raw veneer and we're going to start by laying it out, the panel sizes that we need. These are going to be book match panels, so this is a flitch. I believe there were 6 pieces in this flitch. I can't remember exactly, it might have been 7. But so basically what we're going to do here is we're going to use a straight edge. I got a tape measure telling me how long I need the piece to be. And we're going to use what's called a veneer saw. Now this is a saw that's arced on both sides. I don't know if you can see it. I should have probably done a better example of it. But as you pull back, you pull it back here as I'm pulling, and then when I don't want to pull it all the way through the veneer because it'll rip out the veneer on the back side. So as I get to the end, I push it. The shape of this saw allows you to push and pull the cut. And I'm using the board to hold it down, keep it from cracking because it is very fragile. And as I pull it through here, eventually it'll get through the pieces. And I will end up cutting all 6 of these because I need them all to be the same length. I mean, there are other ways you can cut veneer. You can cut on a table saw as well. You just got to kind of support it. There's definitely other ways. This is the more traditional way to do it. As you can see, I've gotten through the piece right there, and I slide it out of the way. So now I've got all the pieces cut. And what we're doing here is we're going to label them all. So I can keep them in order, because to do the book match and even slip matching or however many matches, you need to keep the pieces in order because the grain will be very close to each other because the pieces are so thin and so pretty much from the same part of the tree, obviously, and you keep them in order that way. So now I've labeled all my pieces, and now what I have to do is I'm going to cut it parallel. So probably off camera I would have straightened this edge out the other side, and now I'm marking this to make my straight panel. Similar to what you would do with a table saw with a regular piece of solid wood. You would join an edge on the joiner and then you'd come back and rip it on the table saw to make it parallel. And I'm going to do the same thing with this veneer, except for I'm using just a veneer saw and just a straight edge with lines marked so they're both the same. And it's not 100% critical that you do this because whenever you're doing veneer work, everything is oversized at this point because once it's pressed to the panel in a solid panel, you're going to cut it to its final dimension on the table side. You never want to make anything exact when you're veneering because obviously things move and whatnot, and once it's solid in a stable panel, then you will cut it to the actual dimensions that you need. And these scraps are just going to get tossed out of the way here. And so now what we've got is we've got our piece that's ready for joining. And there are different methods of joining when you're doing veneer work. I prefer to use a hand plane. A lot of veneers you can't use a hand plane because they're just too figured. I'm surprised, honestly, that this veneer was able to be hand planed, and it hand planed very well. But as you see, I'm setting the piece up between 2 pieces of wood to keep it stable. You want it to overhang about 1/8 of an inch out of your pieces of wood. So now that it's between the 2 pieces of wood, I'm going to clamp it down to my bench. And that'll allow me to use the hand plane. It keeps it stable. You don't want it to move because if it moves and flexes, you're not going to get a straight cut out of your plane. So we're just going to clamp it down to the bench. This one I've got, I think I used 3 clamps. 2 at the end, obviously, 1 in the middle. That was enough to stabilize it between the 2 boards. And you can also use a router, climb cut with a router bit. You can use it. You can run it through table saw if you want, provided you support it with boards like this. You can edge sand it. You can use an edge sander. Same thing. You just got to keep it clamped like we're doing here. But I prefer the hand plane method. It's just, when I can use it, it's just so much better. This is my number 8 plane. It's a 608 bedrock plane. Obviously the longer bed of the plane gives you a straighter cut. And I don't know if you can see here, you can see if you look in the mouth of the plane, you can start to see the pieces coming out. Real fine little shavings of the pieces of veneer. They'll be in the mouth of the plane. And as you make more passes, you're going to get to a point where it's going to cut all the way down. And that's when you know you're straight. And I should be about there right now. That means you've gotten it straight. So you'll have an even cut end to end with the pieces. You can kind of see it in the mouth down there along the bench. You'll see one more pass. And I think on this one, if I'm not mistaken, which looks like I start to catch the poplar board, which is fine. It's not a big deal. Not quite yet there. And here we're getting close. And I believe, yep, so you can start to see it hitting the poplar, the little lighter wood up top. But you can see how the mouth fills up with the shavings of the veneer and gets it to the point where it's perfectly straight, and just about there. Alright, so now we have our pieces jointed. And now what we're going to do is we need to tape these. Now, I've seen many people on YouTube, and it frustrates me. You don't use blue tape for this. You can, if you want, to tape the backside with blue tape to hold it in place before you use what this is, which this is veneer tape. It's a very thin tape. It's water activated, and you roll it on. There's a couple ways you can do it. You can do it, like I said, you could use blue tape on the back, tape this side, and pull the blue tape off. I tend not to do that. It just takes more time. And when you're pulling tape off, sometimes you can get cracks. So the method is, you're going to use these short cross pieces. You're going to do like a stitch. I call it a stitch. So you take your index finger and your thumb, you hold the piece together. You don't want to get the tape too wet, just wet enough. And you can roll it out with the steel roller here, and you roll the joint flat like that. You can also, if you want, you can use an iron. I've done that before, and it helps shrink it. You just got to be careful with the iron, because if you get too much moisture, especially on these veneers that aren't quite as flat, it can get kind of dicey and it make the joint a little more difficult to do. But you just want to get this tape moist. You don't get, it almost instantly dries. The wood soaks it up. So after you've done your stitch, like I've done here, I don't know if I'm stitching. Yeah, I'm stitching another piece here. So you're going to stitch these short pieces perpendicular to the seam that you're doing. And then it'll also allow you to see how your seam looks. And it should be tight, and I'm sure this was definitely tight. So now you're going to take a longer piece, and you're going to go over the top of it with the grain. And see, as I'm putting it down with the grain, I'll roll it flat. And you want to keep this joint completely covered with tape going both directions. And the advantage of using the veneer tape is that what it allows you to do is it's very thin, and it dries a little bit, and it shrinks, and it pulls the joint a little bit tighter. But here we are, we've got this joint almost taped. And what's also, I feel, it's not critical to do, but I always do, and this, we're just finishing the long pieces here. Unfortunately, camera wasn't set where you could see the whole thing. But I like to do a cross piece all the way across the end of it, and what that allows is it keeps you from having an issue of, and this is the cross piece I'm making here, sometimes it just keeps it from cracking the veneer along the end, which can happen sometimes, and you know, and it can be taped back together, but it's just more work. And you obviously always trying to avoid, you know, more work in everything you do. At least that's my goal most of the time. So we pretty much got this all pressed out. We're ready to go now here. This panel should be done. Now what I do is I'll flip the panel over and I'll just double check it and make sure that that seam is tight. And you can tell. You can also hold it up to the light, and obviously if there's gaps, it'll pop right through the light. You can see them. I don't normally have to hold it up to the light. You can generally tell just by doing that and running your hand over it and taking a look. Alright, time for pressing. So, first thing is important, the surfaces have got to be clean. I try not to blow off the veneer because the air can break the veneer. Obviously, it's very thin. It's still very fragile at this point until it's pressed down. We're just going to use ordinary wood glue. We're pressing this on a piece of MDF 3/4 for this panel. I mean, you can press whatever you need, 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch, whatever. But this is 3/4 inch MDF. It's using regular yellow glue, nothing unusual. I use a paint roller. It's like you do painting a wall. And what you're going to do is you're just going to lay the glue on. You know, you don't want it super heavy. You don't want it super light. You want it just right. And then you just get that from experience and where you need to be with the glue. But you want it smooth and even. And as I'm rolling it out, I'm just using my paint roller to get it as even as possible. And it, you know, obviously once it's on there, it'll move around. If you put too much glue on there, the veneer is very thin and it's got pores, obviously. And the veneer is going to seep out the pores, and you're going to end up having to sand a lot to get it off. But it won't ruin the panel. I must have not liked the spot there. So anyway, so now that we got the glue rolled out, now this is important. You don't want to put any glue on the veneer. Veneer, as soon as it gets wet, because this is a water-based glue, and you can use other glues, but I am using water-based glue today, just regular white or yellow glue, wood glue. The veneer will start bending and bowing and going all over the place if you get it wet. You don't want to get it wet, so you want to lay your glue side on the panel, put the glue on the actual substrate, and then you put it on, and then you press the veneer to the panel. Now this is a vacuum bag. This is my vacuum bag. It's just my smaller bag. But I'm only pressing one side, and I'll come back and press the other side later. You can press both sides, and I do that most of the time. I just didn't feel like cutting a piece of melamine for the top caul. And what's important about the bag is you're going to want to make sure, and you can't really see it in this video, the corners of the MDF are run with a router bit, a 1/4 round bit probably, maybe sometimes use a 1/2 round. You gotta break the edges on the substrate, because as you'll see when this thing sucks down, it could puncture holes in the bag, and you don't want to do that, because then once you get holes in the bag, then you got to patch and it just makes a mess. So in theory, if the bag has no leaks, once it makes its complete vacuum, the pump should never cycle. So now I'm clamping the bag off here to make the seal for the bag, and then I'm going to turn the pump on in just a second here. It's almost there. So now the pump's being turned on. You can hear the pump start to activate and suck down. And now you just double checking to make sure everything's good. And it's just, you wait a second. The pump doesn't take very long to evacuate. Generally, I'm just going to clean up and put the roller away while we wait for the bag to suck down. And you can start to see the bag sucking around the form of the substrate that I put in. And then you just wait. It doesn't take very long. Usually about 30 seconds to a minute, depending on how big the panel is that you're pressing and how much air has got to be evacuated. You can hear the pump starting to change its sound. That means it's almost there. We're just about done. Here, just putting the roller away while the pump finishes off. And you'll know when the pump is ready, obviously, because it'll shut off, and it's going to do that in just a second here. That means it's created its full vacuum. Just double check. Yep, there it is. You can hear it shut off. And now it's at full vacuum, and you just wait. Usually about an hour or so, it's good to go. So it's about an hour later, so probably, and now we're going to open the bag. First, shut the pump off, obviously, because if you open the bag and turn the pump back on, it's going to start pumping again. Not that it'll really make a difference, but so you can hear the hiss of the. Here's the hiss of the bag emptying, the air coming out. And you're going to take the panel out if all goes well, because I pressed it on melamine, it didn't stick to the panel. And then we're going to flip it over here. Just give you an idea what the panel actually looks like when it's all pressed out and ready to go. Running my hand over to make sure there's no bubbles or anything, which is not usually a problem. Sometimes it happens. Alright, now here is the finished panel as it is done. I've sanded the tape off, and this is actually part of the cabinet. I didn't actually make any video of the actual panel done. But we've sanded the tape off, sanded the whole thing down, and it's ready to go. As you can see, the veneer is tight and taped and everything else, and it looks great. I appreciate you taking the time to watch the video, and hopefully I will make some more soon and teach you some more of my techniques. Please like, share, and subscribe.